Hey everybody, it's Ed. Before we get started, I want to thank 4 brand new podcast supporters: Cam Torrens, Alex Hover, Skylar Elliott Casey, and Brent Umflett. These 4 folks decided to support the podcast financially, which I greatly appreciate. If you want to learn more about options and how all that works, you can go to mountainandprairie.com/support. And while you're on that page, take a look at the long list of people who've generously supported the podcast over the last few years. It really means the world, and I can't thank you enough. Hey, this is Ed Robertson, and this is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast, where I introduce you to some of the innovative individuals who are shaping the future of the American West. I meet most of these people through my work in land conservation or through my hobbies and interests that revolve around spending time up high in the mountains. My guests include ranchers, writers, entrepreneurs, conservationists, athletes, artists, adventurers, pretty much anyone who's doing important work, has an interesting story, and loves the American West. My guest today is Kelsey Johnson. Kelsey is a Bozeman-based artist whose work highlights the epic wildlife, people, and landscapes of the American West. Using graphite pencils and oil paints, Kelsey creates stunning, lifelike artwork, works that you would assume were created by a full-time artist with decades of experience. But in reality, Kelsey is new to professional art. She balances her artistic endeavors with a full-time job, and she actually started her art business only a few years ago, back in 2018. While Kelsey's artistic career will surely continue to grow and flourish in the coming years, I'm inspired by the commitment and work ethic she exhibits on a daily basis to turn her creative passions into a self-sustaining business. Growing up in Pennsylvania, Kelsey was always artistic, but she put art aside and earned her undergraduate degree in agricultural business and agronomy. After graduation, she began a career with a large corporation where she sold corn and soybean seeds across the United States. While the job was safe and steady with plenty of upward mobility, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was not completely fulfilled by her work. So, as you'll hear her describe, a series of events came together that prompted her to pack up and move to Montana, where she rededicated herself to her artistic inclinations. I greatly admire Kelsey in the way she's created a life and career here in the West. I also feel that she serves as a perfect example of how to balance professional, practical obligations with the pursuit of her creative goals. If you've got creative ambitions but struggle to fit them in between the other demands of life, you'll find Kelsey's story inspirational. We had a wide-ranging conversation discussing everything from her childhood on the East Coast to her eventual move to Montana. We talked about her evolution as an artist, some of her artistic breakthroughs, and her creative influences. She talks a lot about juggling professional and artistic commitments, and she also offers up some excellent book, music, and film recommendations. And as you'll hear in the episode, Kelsey and I will be doing a giveaway of a print of her newest painting titled Land of the Desert Poppy, which I've linked to in the notes. If you want to enter to win, follow me on Instagram and look for a post about the giveaway later this week, which is the week of February 22nd, 2021. Thanks so much to Kelsey for taking the time to chat. Hope you enjoy. Could you tell me and tell the millions and millions of people that are listening, just joking, tell me where you grew up. Where did you grow up before you ended up out in Montana?
Yeah, so it's been kind of a windy road. I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I lived there my whole life until I went to college. So that's kind of where it all started. Going chronologically, I graduated from high school and went straight into a summer program at Penn State University. Was there for the 4 years studying agricultural business, which, you know, my whole life now is about art. So that might sound surprising, but at the time I was just really interested in what could I do. I was very, I grew up riding horses. I was really interested in agriculture just from like being around friends that lived on farms. And I was considering what I could do in life that would allow me to be outside.
That's super smart. And like, I never put any of that kind of thought into stuff when I was in college. I was just like, I got to learn something and make decent grades and get out of here. So that's impressive. Was anybody in your family in agriculture or was just the people you had met along the way?
people I had met along the way. It really wasn't at all in my family. I grew up in a family predominantly of mechanics and car salesmen. You know, my family growing up was very into automobiles. So I took a very different path. So I went to school and got a degree in ag business and with a focus in agronomy, and went straight into seed sales. And I kind of moved all over the East for that. I did some internships and training programs in Pennsylvania and Maryland and Virginia, and then was in a position where the company was like, okay, we're going to put you where we have an opening if you want a job with us. So that happened to be Nebraska.
Yeah.
So I moved to, following my training program and my graduation from college, I moved to Lincoln, Nebraska, where I was for 2 years and worked in the agricultural industry there.
So was that kind of like I would guess when you're in the program you're in, that is a pretty sought after path or a predictable and, sought after way to follow your career after graduation. So like, were you pretty excited about that when you got the job as a senior in college or whenever it worked out? Was it like, all right, cool, I'm on a good path, and then you were kind of surprised when you got into it, you didn't like it, or had you already started thinking, well, maybe this path is not for me?
Yeah, it was linear, and that at the time was a good thing. It was like you take the next step, and if you're successful with that, the opportunity for the next step arises and you take that. And it was all working out for me, and that was great. But a lot of things happened. When I was in Nebraska, I grew up in my agricultural career in the East, and things are quite different there. I was working in the Chesapeake Bay area, and because of the watershed, there were a lot of environmental regulations in place, and I didn't grow up in agriculture. So these are things that I was just observing, and it felt great. Things were progressive, and I was seeing how, caretakers of the land were tending to whatever they were doing, and it felt good to me. And this is not to say that the people I was working with in Nebraska were doing anything wrong, but when I moved there, it was just a very stark contrast. And over the course of my time there, it just didn't feel right. And I just felt like I needed to take a different direction. So that's kind of how my mind started to change. And it was kind of just a progression of my experience.
How did you get your eyes set on the West or Montana? I mean, had you, as a family, had y'all visited the West at all as a kid? I mean, how did that come into focus?
No, not at all. All of our travels and family vacations were really centered around the East, probably just because that was most convenient. But I always had this kind of wanderlust. And growing up in Pennsylvania, it's a mountainous region. You have the Appalachian Mountains there, and I was always so, for whatever reason, I can't really explain it, drawn to the outdoors. So hiking was my thing. I would just kind of go wander off and hike around. And I always had this affinity for being outside and exploring. And that just meant poking around the woods, right?
Yeah.
So when I moved to Nebraska, I didn't have that freedom. There's very little public land in the eastern part of Nebraska that I resided in. It's flat as hell.
Oh, yeah.
So I was kind of missing that little escape that I would go to usually. And what I did was I would end up on any opportunity I had, any chance, any long weekend, drive straight west about 8 hours to Rocky Mountain National Park.
Oh, really?
Yeah, by myself, and just hike. And I remember the first time I went out there, I had never seen mountains like that. I mean, the Appalachian Mountains are like hills compared to the Rocky Mountains. So I just was filled with this grandeur of experiencing the Rocky Mountain West for the first time. And like I said, I went back there every chance I got. So that was kind of my first introduction to the West. And then I met Seth Morris, my boyfriend, and he lived in Helena, Montana at the time.
What was he doing there?
He was working for like a fuel reduction business.
Yep.
Cutting trees. And I would come visit him in Montana. And then the Custer region of South Dakota, the Black Hills, was kind of our halfway point. So we would meet there quite often. And just through visiting him and getting to see all these different places in the West, I instantly, I mean, how can you not? I fell in love with it.
Yeah.
And it was just a matter of time that I was really engrossed in Montana itself and the West, and made the move.
That's really cool. And so as you're kind of falling in love with this region, driving 8 hours on the weekends to go do this, like, what is your family back home thinking about this? I mean, had you always been pretty independent? Like, would it have been a surprise that you would be out doing your own thing, like on that scale, or were they kind of like, what's she doing?
I think they're just like, there she goes. Because I'm the youngest. I have 2 older brothers. I have the best family, and we're all very close, but I have always been the one that kind of just goes and does my own thing. I mean, to this day, my brothers live within a half hour of where my parents live, but I've always kind of been the one that's like, where's Kelsey?
Yeah.
So they weren't surprised at all. They've always had this like mild concern that I'm safe when I'm doing these things, but they just have been supportive and kind of like, what the hell are you up to now? Okay.
That's similar to my family. I mean, I'm the oldest though, but very same thing. I mean, I think I had a lot of friends that were kind of confused because I was older. I was 27 when I moved out here, but I think I had a lot of buddies that were like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? Because I had been had a normal job. I was doing real estate in North Carolina and commercial real estate and all this stuff. And people couldn't understand it. My parents were very understanding about it and just kind of like, yeah, that's what he does. He's kind of a weirdo.
Yeah, I get a lot of the same. My parents have always been so supportive. They've been very adamant about me making the right decisions along every part of this journey. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it was a surprise to anybody that I just kind of bopped around.
Yeah. So you decide to make the move to Bozeman. So do you quit your job at the big corporation and head out, or do you find another job? Like, what is the process of getting to Bozeman like? Like, what did you have to do to make that happen?
Yeah, so I made the decision that I wanted to make the change, and that definitely involved leaving my position at that company. And that was for a long multitude of reasons. And I was ready. I wanted to move here so bad that I was ready to. I remember being on the phone with my dad, and I'm like, I don't care if I have to live under a bridge. I'm doing it, and I'm doing it today. Mm-hmm. And he was kind of like, okay, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Let's think through this. Him and my mother have always been the voice of reason and helped me work through some compulsive decisions. So I did find a position with another agricultural company, a smaller one that's focused more on like efficiency technologies. So It was a great fit. It felt like morally more something that I was willing to partake in. And the team it was just, everything about it was wonderful. So the timing, I mean, think about this now, how fortunate I am with how the timing worked out. It took me 6 months to find that position. And it came down to, I'm talking days before my lease ended in Nebraska. And that was my hard stop. Yeah. I was like of the mind that I'm going to make this move, whether I have a stable career or not at this date. And it worked out so well that it kind of just came down to that date, and it was a smooth transition. So I took that position and moved up to Montana. My mom flew out, and we rented a U-Haul and drove all my crap and my cat all the way to Montana, and been here for 2 years since. So it worked out for the better.
Our story is very, very, very similar because that was the exact same thing with me. I was like, I'm moving out there and I don't care. And then kind of at the last minute, I had this a really good job in North Carolina, but I was like, I'm moving out there. And if I have to, work at a coffee shop or whatever until I find something more steady, I will. And then kind of at the last minute, I got a job in the real estate business and did the road trip, but with my dad. No cat. But you landed in Bozeman.
Yes.
Yep. And so let's talk about art. Talk about your art a little bit, because I'm super interested in that. When had you always been artistic? Had that always been something that had been a focus of yours as a kid?
Oh, totally. I mean, that was my thing. I was always doodling and drawing. And although I never took any formal or intentional classes, I was involved in the high school art programs and had, for a short period of time, considered maybe moving forward with graphic design or some type of art education, art school, but just had like the notion that you couldn't make a living out of that, which is hilarious to me now. This is kind of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I've always been really interested in art.
And so in your, like, say, high school, college, what did your art look like then? Because when I look at it now, like somebody will go on your website, and I'll have links in the episode notes for people who maybe are not yet familiar, and they can click through. I mean, it's just this beautiful art that is a reflection of the American West. And like, that's, before we even met, like, that's what I thought about when I thought about your art. But when you're in college, you had never been out here. So I doubt that was like a big focus. So what was your focus back then?
Yeah. Well, thank you. First of all, it was always just kind of what I had time for. And like I said, I was always interested in it. So that would look to me like a lot of doodling throughout that period of time. I did my stuff in high school, which I was in an AP class, and that included just kind of whatever projects they assigned to the class at the time. And if I'm looking back at high school, I did a little concentration on portraiture, and I love that type of thing. And I think that's kind of reflected in some of the works that I've done recently. And I plan to dive into that a little bit more. But the West and the Western influence that you see in my work right now, I'm so interested in aspects of the West. And Western art is this very, to me, interesting society in itself. You've had quite a bit of Western artists on your show. I found some of my favorite artists through your conversations, which is great. But I think it's just, like I said, it's its own little society. And that's always been very fascinating to me. And the transition from my work to exploring this Western art culture kind of got started in the wildlife stuff. Like I said, I've always loved the outdoors. So I was just drawn to creating artworks around wildlife. And I kept that theme. Most of my early stuff that you see represented in my actual art business from the early times is all wildlife. And out in the West, wildlife is a big aspect of Western life. So it was actually a very easy transition to enter the Western art world.
And when you talk about portraits, you recently did a collaboration with Modern Huntsman in their most recent issue with some portraits, correct? I
did, yeah. They had a portion of, I forget which volume, where they featured some conversations with influential women in the West, and I drew portraits of those women for that volume, which was so fun.
It's such a small world, and it's crazy how there's all this overlap. Because like Tyler Sharp, the guy who created Modern Huntsman, was one of my early interviews, and then there's just all these threads that connect all these different people doing cool stuff throughout the West. But it seems like right there in your region, there's really this interesting crew of people that are all working on different things. How much has that played a role in your kind of development as an artist, the community of artists there? I mean, throughout the West, I guess, but specifically there in the Bozeman area, or Southwest Montana, maybe I'll say, where you can collaborate with these different people. I mean, has that helped you out a lot, or helped you kind of grow as an artist faster than you would have on your own?
Ed, it was huge. Yeah. When I moved here to Bozeman 2 years ago, I was dabbling in having an art business and trying to, think about what it would be to be an artist. But when you are in a place where it's part of the culture and there are so many creatives, and that's not just artists. I mean, there's photographers, there's musicians, you walk down the street and there's an art gallery every 5 feet. It makes you feel like it's part of the culture and it's more possible for you to pursue. So just seeing other people around you make the effort to have their creative dreams come true, it's like rocket fuel. I mean, it was that moving to Bozeman was really where my professional pursuit of art took off.
I mean, I've had similar experience, not physically being in physical, proximity to a lot of artists, but this podcast has shown me that there's an opportunity to make a living, or at least contribute to the family's financial bottom line by doing creative work. And it's not crazy. I mean, because I had the same idea you did, that you mentioned that you didn't think it was practical to have a career that was revolved around creative stuff. But when you meet all these cool people, and they're good people, and they're just normal people, but they're doing this stuff, and they figured out a way to be committed to it. And it's not easy, but you can make money doing it, and you can make it into at least a side gig. And
right.
You know, I don't consider what I do really creative or even in the close ballpark of the type of stuff you do, but it's what I like doing. And so if you can make a little bit of money of doing it, it's pretty awesome. When was the first time you sold a piece of art? And I'm not so much concerned about like you making money as much as the validation you get when somebody's like, I want to pay you for this thing you created. Like when was the first time that happened?
This kind of leads into a funny story about success and ultimate failure.
That's good. I love those stories.
Yeah. So I had sold a couple original pieces for like $50 in college. I had a couple friends that knew that I could draw, and they were like, "Hey, Christmas is coming up. Can you draw my sister's dog? And that's going to be my Christmas present to her." So I had kind of like dabbled in doing what you would consider commission work throughout that time. And when I was first really like, okay, I'm going to try to do this and try to turn it into a money-making venture, I drew a series of wildlife scenes. I think there was like a bighorn ram and a mule deer, blah, blah, blah. And I was going to an event in the outdoor industry, and I had never made prints before, which prints are quite a big part of what I do now.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm going to make a few prints of these works and take it to this event and market it and see if I can make some money. And I went to this print shop, and they were great. And they showed me their tiers of, if you buy this much, it's this much money. And I decided to print, I think, 25 copies of each work. There might have been 3. Well, it came out to like $1,700, the printing bill. And that was a really hard decision for me to make, because that's a lot of money, especially it was a lot of money for me back then.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know, I had never sold prints before. I didn't know if it was something that people would be interested in. And I'm like, this is my dream. I'm going to do it. And I think I sold 3 out of all of them. And I'm stuck with this like, hundreds of dollars bill. And that was a pretty crushing moment.
But it's good though. Like in the end, at least in my experience, and I'm a bit of a dumbass, so I'll put an asterisk there on that. But like, that's the way I learn. Those lessons that you can get through something like that can really be painful and possibly embarrassing. Like there's been certain things that have happened in my life where I don't know that there would be a better way for me to have learned the lesson. And while it still makes me embarrassed to look back on, it's like, well, at least I learned something, and I won't do that again.
Oh, totally. And I mean, all I can do is laugh about it now, because it's done with. And I learned so much about how to create a contingency plan and maybe like slow my roll a little bit when it comes to putting things out there. And I'm glad to say that things have come quite far since then, but that was a fun experience. And so since then, I just started dabbling in it a little bit more, was a little bit more cautious, and grown the sales since then. So that was kind of one of my first experiences.
And so, I mean, I think it's worth noting, people, they may forget as we're talking, but, you're doing this, and still to this day, you're doing it on the side. Like, and that's one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on here, because you're creating this really stunning art that really stands out. In Instagram, it's just, you're just getting hammered with all these images over, and they all kind of blend together. But yours, in my mind, it stands out. Like when I see it, I'm like, oh man, that is awesome. And it makes me stop all this endless, neurotic scrolling to actually enjoy something. And so, but I think it's really important for people, especially people who have, ambitions of doing creative work, that you're doing this on the side. Like it's not like you're sitting around for 50 hours a week just creating art and thinking about, I mean, you've got other commitments. And so, I mean, can you talk about that balance a little bit, and either the good or the bad that comes with that?
Yeah. I mean, there are absolutely pros and cons. And like you said, it's a balance. Luckily for me, I'm so enthusiastic about this and all of my other work that it's not a burden for me to fit it all in. I mean, you have to be excited when you wake up to do all of it, or you're going to half-ass every part. So I like to point out, it's like, this is hilarious because sometimes people ask me this, how do you have time in the day to fit it all in? And like, Ed, you're asking me this, but you have kids. I don't have kids. That's how I fit it in.
I'll tell you though, I think I'm better off with the kids. Like I didn't start this podcast until my daughter was 6 months old when I started this thing. And it's, for some reason, I mean, I'm bumping up against the edge now as far as time, but it's, I feel like I do better when I'm busy, like when I have commitments and I have to work within those commitments. So you're the same way?
Yeah, I'm kind of what you would consider probably like an intense person. So I don't like to sit still. I actually kind of thrive off of having too much to do. Mm-hmm. So, you make it work.
And what's been the biggest surprise you've had, once you set up the business, you got the website and you're like, all right, I'm going to make this into a side business. Like what has surprised you about it?
That people care. Yeah. That was what held me up for so long, as I just didn't think that anybody would, be enthusiastic about my work. And it's been the most pleasant surprise. I've made really great connections through it. And to this day, I'm floored by the fact that anybody would be interested in it. So that's been a huge surprise to me.
And so this is kind of a specific question, but I'm just thinking about like if I were listening to this and I wanted to do something, but just had not for one reason or another. I hate talking about big breaks because I think that's like, it makes it seem like, well, if you got to wait for somebody else to pick you. Like I'm a big fan of Seth Godin. He's always like talking about pick yourself. Don't wait for other people to pick you.
Totally.
But, so you're cranking on this artwork. You're committed to the process. You're making it happen. But were there any points where that kind of helped you get more visibility? Like, I mean, I would imagine the Modern Huntsman thing helped, but that was recent. I mean, say 18 months ago. Did anything happen? Did anybody kind of vouch for you or share your work that kind of got it in front of more people?
A couple of things have happened over time that would kind of lend to that. I think mostly it's a slow burn. So just not letting up on the gas pedal has been the most beneficial to me, making sure that I'm consistent with what I'm putting out there. I am fortunate enough to have had some exposure with some pretty influential characters. Like I worked with Modern Huntsman. My boyfriend Seth works for Meat Eater. My first time to Bozeman, actually, I was hanging out with Seth and, I was usually only here on the weekends. And he's like, hey, I got to go into the Meat Eater office. And before I knew it, I'm sitting in the podcast studio with a set of headphones on. And Steve is, he's like, hey, you can talk if you want, or you can just sit there. And I was new into hunting at the time. So they were talking about an elk hunt and I like raised my hand like you would in a pot. And he's like, yes. And I had a question for him. And in the middle of my question, he was like, who are you? What do you do? And he made me kind of plug my artwork. So that was like,
that's pretty big.
Yeah, it was a big break. He's, a lot of people listen to that podcast and he was so kind to allow me to just kind of plug my stuff there. So little things like that over time. He's been recently talking about my artwork on the podcast again. So that area has been good. But I think overall it's really just consistency over time. I'm starting to do some advertising. That's been helping. Just a multitude of efforts.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, the work is the work, right? I mean, you can't, you got to be focused on the work.
Yes.
There's a good book that I just read. I put it out in my last book recommendation email. It's by Seth Godin. It's called The Practice. Mm-hmm. And it's all about, I think the subtitle is like how to ship creative work. And it's all about the need to be focused on just the practice of making stuff and putting it out in the world and not getting hung up on, I need a big break or I need this or this to happen. It's just like focus on the work. And if it's good, it'll spread one way or another. And he also has a really good discussion, several different discussions in there about making money off of your work. Cause I think a lot of people could think that if you get too focused on making money on a creative project, that it can kind of devalue it in some way, or it'll lose its soul in some way. But he has the best discussion I've ever seen about the importance of making money from creative projects, because it allows you to make more art. Yeah. And so I'll put a link to that in the notes for people. I highly recommend it. It's like every chapter is maybe like 3 paragraphs, and there's like 250 chapters. And so you can crank through it. I mean, you can pick it up and read a chapter in 30 seconds. But I think that's a really good one. Talking about the creative community there in Bozeman and just in the West at large, who do you admire in that world? Like, do you have any specific mentors or heroes? They could be people that you know that have helped you out. Like, sounds like Steve Rinella has been great. Or people that you've just observed from afar and dig their art or dig their artistic process.
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I mean, I spend a lot of time researching artists because I don't have formal training, watching other people's work, not to try to duplicate it, but just to see how people are doing things. I'm very inspired by the creative mind, and that differs so greatly across artists that inspire me, that I spend a lot of time kind of watching what these people are doing. You've had Mark Maggiore on, is the greatest of all time. I think he's very interesting to watch. His work inspires me a lot. There's an artist out of Colorado, Jill Sukup, and Jill, forgive me, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your last name right, but I love her work. She's got a really unique style, and she was so kind enough to have a conversation with me. I'm not shy about reaching out to these people and just asking for advice. And I had a conversation with her. She gave me some really great tips.
Can you share like one of them?
Most important thing that we talked for like an hour, and she said at the end, she's like, hey, I think you're doing all the right things, but at the end of the day, if you're not sitting down and painting, and that is your focus, like, you can do marketing, you can reach out to other artists, you can try to do whatever, but at the end of the day, your product is the most important thing. And if you're not in love with it, and you're not working on it, and you're not inspired by it, you're not going to get anywhere as an artist. So it's just that I wake up every day and try to remind myself of that. That's been really inspirational. And in Bozeman specifically, like, our friend group there's photographers, there's artists, there's writers. We're friends with some of the most inspiring people I've ever met. So the way that we've surrounded ourselves with these people that are killing it and whatever they're doing has been really influential.
Yeah. And I think you can think about it across such a wide spectrum. Like, I think what Steve Rinella has built there, I mean, that's a creative project, and that's, on one real far end of the spectrum, just ultra success on a huge level. And then, down to, somebody who's doing street art. And it's amazing that they're in the middle of Montana. There's this, I don't think 30, 40 years ago, people would have thought of Bozeman as this creative hub. I mean, it's got a lot of great things going, but I think that's kind of new, at least in the last maybe 20 years. So I'm jealous you live up there.
I'm supposed to say, Montana sucks. Don't come here, because it's getting a little crazy.
Yeah. No, I was talking about Montana the other day, and somebody was like, well, you and everybody else. And there was something on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is so annoying. And there was some little article on the side that said, from New York to Montana. And I was like, oh God.
Yeah.
So I don't want to come up there. Y'all got enough people. You don't need more people. So I want to talk about your one specific piece of art, and just one more thing about your artistic process. I always ask this of artists, and I'm always really curious about it. How do you know when you're finished with a piece of work? Because, and you do a variety of mediums like painting and graphite, but like, I would think you could keep messing with it for years and never be done. So how do you know, like, all right, I'm done? The
point of diminishing returns.
It's like econ. I think that I'm an econ major. I think I've heard that before.
Yeah. There's a point to which you're like, oh, I could, I need to just tweak this and tweak that, but you start messing it up.
But like, how do you know you messed it up?
You've been staring at this flat surface for weeks, on end. And it can get hard because there's a point where you're like, I don't even know what I'm looking at anymore. I think you just have to have the wherewithal to step back and be like, okay, I'm not going to make this any better. I'm actually messing it up. And for me, I don't know how that is for other artists, but for me, that's a very distinct point of time that you just have to be like, okay, I'm not making this any better. Point of diminishing returns.
Have you ever completely abandoned? I mean, I'm sure you have, but like, is it a abnormal occasion when you just give up and you're like, this isn't working, I'm done? Because like I had a artist named A.D. Maddox on very early in the podcast, and she said that one time she had all these different unfinished pieces in her studio, and she went in there with a box cutter and and destroyed them all. And then she was like, now I can start, and now I can start with a fresh perspective. And that seems pretty intense, but I'm not asking if you like slash up your studio there, but do you ever just quit?
I can see how that like purging would be refreshing. I've only ever done that. I mean, I haven't been doing this that long, so it could certainly happen many other times down the road. I've only done that once. And in that piece, it wasn't, in a lot of my pieces, I kind of make up parts of the painting. I combine different things that I've seen. It's not something I work from one reference image, and sometimes it just doesn't work out. And I took a piece that I was almost done with. I had spent weeks on it and actually started over with a whole different concept. That's the only time I've ever just been like, all right, this one's in the garbage.
So you are relatively new to this, but your work is amazing. And like, I think I had Morgan Irons on, who's another artist, and
she's a good friend. I love Morgan.
She's awesome. She's so cool and funny. But both of y'all, it's when I see what you're doing relatively early into an artistic journey, it's like, golly, like I never want to take away from all the hard work, but there is this level of talent that's just amazing, that you've cultivated through endless hard work. But so being pretty young in the business, but producing really amazing, unique work, what would be your advice to somebody who's maybe around your age, or even like my age, who has creative aspirations, but can't get it started for one reason or another, and needs that initial kind of jolt of momentum? What's your advice? Yeah,
I think if I could write a letter to myself 6 or 8 months ago when I started painting. So that's when I started painting. Just within the last year. Yeah.
You never painted before? Like never messed with oil paint or anything?
Never in my life had touched oil paint. And it was a long time coming. Graphite was my thing. Yeah. I was kind of known as like the graphite artist, sketching, illustrating. That was my thing. And I had never thought I would deviate from that because I was so comfortable with it. It's kind of funny how it all worked out. I had been thinking about painting and expanding. In my graphite works are very portrait-like, where there's a subject and no background.
Oh yeah. I love it. People need to go to your website and click through in the notes.
Thank you. But that was my style, and it was great and all, but I felt like I was kind of stagnant in that, and that I was not expanding to trying different things, because I was ultimately, and I didn't admit this to myself at the time, but I was afraid to do so. So that's kind of how I was doing things for a very long time, and COVID hit. I had all this stuff planned. I was going to travel. I had like a bazillion trips booked, and I was just going to keep drawing and doing my thing. And then all of that got shut down, and I was locked in my house facing a blank canvas of demons.
Yep.
Like, okay, you better figure out how to face your fears and get this done. So, that's when I started painting. It was like COVID time.
That's a perfect segue. Give us a sneak preview of, or try to describe the piece that you just finished, apparently like 45 minutes ago, that we're gonna do a little collaboration on.
Yeah, which I'm really excited for. And I'm staring at it right now, which might not be good because I'm kind of nitpicking it, but I just finished a piece I've been thinking about for a long time. It was originally going to be one of those portrait pieces. And I want to get back to your question on advice, but I'm staring at this. It's a bison, and I have so many bison works. For some reason, I keep coming back to the bison. It's a bison on set in like the Sonoran Desert during the spring poppy bloom. And that's pretty much it. It's pretty big. I think it's 20 by 24 oil painting.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That is big. You sent me photos of it like halfway done and then almost done. And I hadn't seen the complete finished product. But if people don't follow me on Instagram, you can. And I'm going to do a giveaway. We're going to do a giveaway of a print of that particular painting the 2 or 3 days after we release the podcast. So if you're listening to this and you don't follow either me or Kelsey on Instagram, click through and do that. And we're going to do a giveaway. So that's very generous of you to do that. People will love it.
Oh, absolutely. I'm excited.
I do book giveaways all the time. And it's like people go crazy for like a $12 book. And so this is like a badass piece of art. People are going to love it. So sorry, back to the advice.
Yeah. So I'm just sorry, I get sidetracked.
Me too.
I'm thinking about what I would say to me directly prior to starting painting. And it's like, why did I wait? Just try. I was so scared to try because I thought I would fail, but I failed a million times in my life. I don't know why that affected me so much. So like my piece of advice is just try. I love Joe Rogan, and he had a UFC fighter on, Francis Ngannou. I might be pronouncing that wrong, but I was listening to his story. And one thing that guy said over and over again that just resonated with me so much was, you have the right to try the thing that you've been wanting to try forever. Like, you have a right, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from. It's your right to follow your dream. If it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, you find something else. But I wish I would have heard that when I had been putting off picking up a paintbrush.
I think that's great advice. And I think, speaking for myself, I mean, I think people need to understand that like there will be discomfort associated with it. I mean, it is not comfortable. And if it were comfortable, everybody do it, you know? And it's like we were talking about before we started recording, that I still get super nervous. I mean, I got nervous before I called you. And we had talked, you know, like there's no reason for me to be nervous. Like but I was I get this feeling in the pit of my stomach, 100 and however many episodes I am into this thing. And I would imagine that there's a little bit of that with you when you put a piece of your art that you've spent so long out into the world. And so what I've tried to do is frame it as a good thing. You know, that means I'm getting ready to do something important. If there's this little nervousness, my stomach feels funny, that's good because it means I'm doing something.
It means you care, and I think that's half the battle.
All right, one more subject I want to talk about that we could probably do a whole podcast about. But you've gotten into hunting. Talk about that process. Did you ever hunt as a kid?
I didn't, and actually, I was vehemently opposed. I consider myself like an animal lover, or whatever, and I didn't grow up. You know, I think that my dad probably hunted a bit when he was younger, but it's not something we did. And he always said, I could never shoot a deer. It looks like our dog. And that was like burned into my soul, right, for so long. And he's right. It was a hard thing to start to do. You kind of have to get over that and, you know, separate the emotions from what you're trying to achieve there. I was interested in hunting when I lived in Nebraska. I had started to become aware of the conservation side of things. And there's so much good information there about what it means to pursue your own meat source, everything that sportsmen do to take care of the land and to take care of the resource of wildlife. And that was so influential to my perspective. It was kind of like I could realize my true emotions and self, but also be in the pursuit of hunting. So that was really monumental to me to kind of be introduced to the world of conservationists, and that led into hunting. And I was very interested in it up to the point where I met Seth. And Seth is an avid outdoorsman, just kind of all around a really great resource. So my interest paired with him as a mentor and others, you know, our roommate Rick has been kind of his sidekick throughout everything and has been a huge help to me as well. So being exposed to these people that agreed with everything that I was starting to be interested in exposed me well to the world of hunting. And it's just taken off since then. I love it.
You said your dad said that it looks like a dog. I used to know this guy who's a really big bird hunter. I mean, like obsessed quail hunter, obsessed duck hunter, had all these great properties, but he would never wanted to go deer hunting. And this is in Georgia and Louisiana. But he said, yep, I'm never going to shoot anything with eyelashes.
Oh
I thought that was
gosh, I
funny.
know. I still feel that way. I mean, every time I see I love wildlife, and I spend a lot of time just even trying to observe them, photograph them. If we're not hunting, we're out camping or scouting or anything. And I love being in the presence of them so much that I haven't let go of that at all. But I've gained a better appreciation for providing your own meat source, the pursuit. In that you learn so much about their lives, their patterns, what they need, their habitat. And it's been actually more enriching to my love for wildlife than anything else.
Yeah, and I think there's nobody better right now than Steve Rinella and everybody he surrounds himself with for explaining that and explaining how hunters are 99% of the time they're the biggest advocate for wildlife, for these beautiful animals with eyelashes. Like they love them more than anybody. And so if people don't listen to Rinella's podcast or read his books, you need to, because I've personally learned so much. So what else do you do for fun? Kind of a random question, but what do you do there in Montana for fun?
So I just, anything that involves spending time outside, I try to take a break from work and painting to take a hike every day. If I can just get outside, it's like so good for my soul. For fun, we have a lot of fun. We go any free weekend we have, we're trying to find somewhere to camp, go fishing, do like a long backpack trip. We have a kayak. It's almost overwhelming how many options we have on a given weekend. Like we want to go do this. Our friends want to meet and camp for a weekend. The fun is kind of endless with the outdoor resources we have around us here.
So I've got a few questions I like to ask towards the end. Can we run through a few of those?
Absolutely.
What are your favorite books? Like, I generally like to know books about the West, but I also like to know just books that you've enjoyed over your life that have helped shape your career. I mean, it could be anything about art, creativity, could be stuff about conservation. Just, can you name a few books that you think people should read?
Yeah, I have a little stack here. My favorite book about the West, and you had her on, Losing Eden by Sarah Dant.
Oh man, she's awesome. I saw her just before the pandemic.
Yeah, that book, I actually recommend that to anybody that's just kind of at surface level, trying to get more interested in the ecology of the West. It is such a great overview and digestible. It's not like a real thick book that you kind of can lose track of. It's, for me, it's been a great resource in learning more about the place in which I live. So I recommend that book. I know others have, but for good reason.
Yeah, that's a good one. And another thing I liked about that book is you get all these, the background on a lot of these names you hear a lot, like Frank Church of the Frank Church Wilderness. I didn't know who he was. And that book, it gives it to you in a bite-sized portion that's not overwhelming, but you can learn a lot.
Yeah, it's been one of the best resources for me, just learning more about this place. My favorite author is James Galvin.
Yeah, The Meadow.
Yes, The Meadow is amazing. Actually, Becca Cito personally recommended that to me, and that was my introduction to James Galvin. And then I read Fencing the Sky. And his writing style is so interesting to me because he's poetic, but he has this matter-of-fact way in which he writes that you read it and you kind of have to read it again. And when you read it again, you're like, why in the hell didn't I think of that? But you could have never written it the way he writes it.
People love him. And it seems like a lot of writers and authors really love him. Like they really admire him. And I think that's always a sign. And I've actually never read any of his stuff. My wife read The Meadow and loved it. And I've got it on my shelf, but I've not read it, but he gets rave reviews across the whole spectrum.
He's great. He's just got such a great voice. And this is kind of off the wall, but one of my main inspirations for my work, like I said, is diving into other creatives, and that can deter greatly from just artwork, like painting.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with music, different music genres. So one of my favorite books, and it's kind of dark, but you have to understand this person for who he is to appreciate it. I love the poetry of Jim Morrison from The Doors.
Yeah.
I'm looking at his book right now, his collection of poetry, The Lords and the New Creatures. I read it all the time. It's just, he's such a complex, tragic, creative person. I'm fascinated by him and other people like him. So I like to kind of dive into the works of those people. It helps me just digest my own work to try to think through what this a complex character was going through in his life. And you can see a lot of that stuff in his poetry.
That's really cool. And nobody's mentioned that before. I'd be interested to see that. Speaking of music, and we can come back if there are more books, but I'm not musical at all. I appreciate music, but like I took piano lessons for 6 months when I was a kid, and my mom made me quit or stop paying the bills because all I do is like tell jokes with the teacher the whole time. I would not practice. But I appreciate music and musicians. What musicians do you like?
This is actually a really interesting topic for me. Music has been really influential in my life, and it's something that people don't really know about me, but it goes all the way back to my childhood. My brothers were in a band in middle school and high school and throughout, and music has been so important in my family, and specifically like classic rock, which is kind of a broad genre, but my brothers were in a band in my childhood. I had such a badass childhood, and I think about it a lot. My childhood was like getting toted around to mechanic shops, and my grandfather owned a car dealership. So like sitting in the dirt in the shop and listening to music. And then with my brothers, my mom and my dad were so enthusiastic about their little music career that we would just go around to shows, and they were on the radio, and they opened up for the Allman Brothers at one point.
What?
They were great. Yeah, they were like a big freaking deal. And my childhood was just going around and listening to bands and being kind of like a little rock and roll kid. And
That's awesome.
yeah, so I think that's why it's so influential to me. But like my favorite artists, I dive in quite deep, like in that genre: Neil Young, Traffic, Cream, Led Zeppelin. I listen to a lot of that stuff.
That's a big deal about your brother's band.
Yeah, they play just kind of recreationally now. They never pursued it professionally, but they totally could have. I mean, they were really good.
Any other musicians you admire? I mean, maybe, you don't even have to like their music, because there are a lot of musicians that I think are interesting people that I don't particularly like their music, but I think they're real characters, and you can learn a lot from them. Yeah,
I still to this day kind of deep dive. I'm really into like Americana folk right now, like acoustic sessions, live sessions. I've been listening while I've been painting this piece. Jose Gonzalez, his work is amazing, and he's just has kind of like I'm interested in these artists that have a unique sound. There's a little bit of like a sadness behind their music, but also it's uplifting at the same time, if that makes any sense. I think you just probably need to listen to it to understand what I'm saying. But I can listen to, I'll start painting and I'll do a deep dive on like Celtic violin. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just anything. I'm really influenced by music, and it can be anything as long as the musician is passionate. I can kind of feed off of that.
So do you watch films, movies, anything like that? Any particular films that are of interest?
Yeah. And I'm realizing that I just kind of like suck inspiration from all of these creative things, because I'm also really obsessed with films. I like weird movies. Have you ever seen Out of the Furnace?
No, I haven't. Is it like Roadhouse at all?
I know you're obsessed with Roadhouse. I would say it's like a pretty far deviation from Roadhouse.
Oh, well, I don't want to see it then.
But regardless, you might like it. Give it a chance. Like kind of like indie films. I like. So there's a long list of weird movies like that. But did you ever watch Big Land?
No, I've never even heard of it.
So Big Land there's a couple. Their Instagram is Tight Loops Fly, and they're basically like.
You sent me that. Yeah, you sent me that. Okay.
You should watch it. I want to give these guys a shout out. It's a film. They have it on their website, but you can look it up on YouTube. I would recommend going to, I think their website is probably something like Tight Loops Fly, and buying it to support them. They're a couple that travels around the United States in a van, and they were based in the Northeast, and they planned this big trip in pursuit of brook trout in Labrador, and they made a film out of it. But the crazy thing about this film is just the talent that these two have in creating this film. There's like, they are artists, so they incorporate some of their drawings, their filmmaking, and their editing and compiling the film. It's honestly like nothing I've ever seen before. It is really amazing. And if you're interested in watching like just outdoor media, I cannot recommend this film enough. It's called Big Land. So I wanted to just touch on that because I watch it a lot. I watch it every so often. Their creative process is another one of those things that is just so inspiring to me.
Well, I'll have a link to that because I remembered you had emailed it to me, and then some reason I got buried in my inbox. So I'll revisit that as well. That's great.
It's great.
I love talking about books and music and films where people can link through and click through and learn about all this stuff because I've learned so much from other podcasts. So we'll have good episode notes on this one. So kind of last big question. You've already given some of this, but just knowing everything you know from your journey from the East Coast to out West and your creative experiences and while managing, the regular day-to-day life, 9-to-5 job stuff. I mean, do you have any kind of parting words of wisdom for the people that listen to this podcast?
I mean, I don't know if I'm qualified to give anybody advice.
That's what everybody out here says, and that's because they're humble, and I appreciate that. But you are. I'll give you permission.
I would probably just bring it back to the advice I'd give to myself who was on the cusp of trying something new. There's a lot of what I recognize as fear and anxiety in our culture today. And I think that can be so crippling. And I really feel for people that are, especially now, going through a tough time. And I'm really fortunate to be able to pursue something that I'm really enthusiastic about. But I think if I could just say anything, it would be, do not be afraid to try the thing that you've been wanting to try for so long. Just do not have the fear to branch out and pursue it.
I think that's great advice. And I really appreciate you coming on and chatting with me. And I'm excited to see how everything progresses for you in the coming years, because you're obviously off to a strong start. But really admire everything you do. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Ed.
Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. I know your time is valuable, so it means the world that you spend it listening. If you want to support the podcast and help it to continue to spread and grow, there are a few ways you can help. Number one, pass it along to a friend or share it on social media. Word of mouth recommendations are the most powerful way for ideas to spread, so I'd love it if you could share the podcast with a few pals who might enjoy it. Number two, you can go to Apple Podcasts and give it a 5-star review. Good reviews encourage the Apple overlords to suggest the podcast to others. So there's a link in the notes if you'd be so kind as to give it 5 stars. Number 3, you can support the podcast financially via Patreon, and there are exclusive benefits for those who do, including a monthly behind-the-scenes newsletter, Mountain and Prairie stickers, live and recorded video chats with podcast guests, and much more. Number 4, I've also got 2 emails that I send out. The first is my weekly email called Good News from the American West, which I send out every Wednesday. It's only positive news, something we can all use a little more of these days. And my other email is my bi-monthly book recommendations email. One email every other month with 5, 6, 7, or 8 books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The thousands of people on both of these lists will vouch for me. No spam or other funny business. And number 5, finally, check out my online store for Mountain and Prairie stickers, shirts, and coffee mugs. I've got some really cool designs from Western artists with more on the way. So head to mountainandprairie.com/shop to check it all out. I'd love to connect with you. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, so look me up on either of those platforms by my name or through the links on my website. All right, that's it. Thanks so much for your support.